in a previous video I've already posted about idiopathic chronic hepatitis in Dobermans. We know that the liver directly or indirectly affects every cell and every process in the body. It's the largest internal organ, and it performs over 500 chemical functions that are absolutely vital for the continuation of life. Aside from the functions that you see here, the liver metabolizes and filters blood. It produces components like proteins and enzymes for digestion. It stores iron and copper, releasing them as needed and then eliminating any excess through the bile. And then the liver produces vital blood clotting factors. Different from idiopathic chronic hepatitis that was covered in that video, chronic hepatitis in Dobermans, as well as some other breeds like Labrador Retrievers, Dalmatians, Westies, and Bedlington Terriers, is often caused or worsened by excessive copper storage in the liver, and that's referred to as Copper Associated Hepatitis, or CAH. It's believed that Dobermans have a very complex genetic predisposition to CAH, which dampens their metabolic ability to secrete excess copper out of their body. For these Dobermans, they can manage a certain amount of copper, but there comes a certain tipping point at which the system is so overtaxed with excess copper that it can't keep up with the demand, and it starts storing all this excess in the liver. This stored excess eventually rises to toxic levels, making the dog feel very sick, and if it's left untreated, it will lead to liver failure and death. Copper-associated hepatitis is asymptomatic, meaning that it goes unnoticed, flying under the radar until the late stages of the disease manifest themselves. CAH symptoms can include a loss of appetite, lethargy, weight loss, vomiting, diarrhea, excessive drinking and urinating, fluid in the abdomen, yellowing of the eyes or gums, and increased bleeding. Prior to the onset of actual symptoms, early liver disease can be detected through blood work, particularly elevated ALT. While your vet can suspect that your dog might have CAH based on its symptoms and its blood work and perhaps an ultrasound, it can only be confirmed by actually doing a liver biopsy done under general anesthesia. Because veterinarians and owners don't want to put a dog under anesthesia needlessly, and because of the cost to do so, it's typical for an owner to opt to wait while other avenues are pursued, like a change of diet, medications, and supplements. Should those attempts fail, and then they go in and do take a biopsy of the liver and CAH is the culprit, by that time the damage to the liver, which is inflamed and scarred, is pretty much irreversible. And therefore the survival time and the response to treatment is going to be very poor. In February 2021, an editorial was published in JAVMA, which is the journal for the American Veterinary Medical Association, and it was penned by veterinary scientists from some of the most esteemed veterinary colleges like Cornell University, Colorado State University, the University of Cambridge in England, and Tufts University. And that editorial signaled an alarm that cases of CAH have been growing, and even more concerning, were growing across all breeds, not just those with a genetic predisposition like Dobermans. That editorial prompted AAFCO, which is the regulatory body that establishes guidelines for nutrients and labeling on commercially sold dog food, to begin researching and talking about the issue of excessive copper in dog food. Up until now, AAFCO has only required a minimum amount of copper in dog food, and that amount is based on if it's a puppy food for growth or if it's an adult food for maintenance. Although copper is an essential trace mineral, without any sort of regulatory cap on the maximum that manufacturers are allowed to put into their food, they had free rein to ignore the copper content of their food, with many foods containing grossly exaggerated amounts of copper, many times that of the minimum requirements. Through March 1st, 2024, AAFCO has pretty much opened the door and is allowing public comment on a proposal that they are working on to allow a controlled copper claim that food manufacturers could put on their labels. This would essentially put a max cap on copper in those dog foods. This would be a huge step in potentially reducing the harmful effects of excess copper in food and could potentially prevent many of the Copper Associated Hepatitis cases and deaths related to that copper every year. Let me clarify that if you have a dog that has already been diagnosed with a Copper Associated Hepatitis, it's most likely going to benefit from a prescription diet from your veterinarian's office. Those prescription diets actually have copper levels that are below those AAFCO minimum copper requirements in order to help the liver recover from the excess copper storage. However, the proposal that's being discussed is not about dogs that have been diagnosed with CAH, but rather with the average consumer who's concerned about raising and maintaining their dog on foods that have excessively high copper values, especially for breeds like the Doberman. Now, it is true that there's no large body of evidence that constitutes what is a safe upper limit or maximum tolerance for copper in dog foods, and whether genetically predisposed breeds like the Doberman might have their own unique upper level threshold. So even if AAFCO establishes a numerical cap for copper, that value may still be too high for some breeds, Dobermans included. But some cap is better than no cap. If this proposal is passed, it's going to allow manufacturers to label their food as controlled copper, providing they can verify that copper cap through ongoing product testing. This is going to give consumers the opportunity to easily recognize those foods which do have copper caps, have the ability to easily compare those caps between foods, and thus be able to avoid foods which have vast overages of copper levels if that's of concern to them. As owners of Dobermans, we need to let AAFCO know that we deserve to know the amount of copper that's in the foods that we research and that we choose to feed our dogs. As a breed that's predisposed to copper-associated hepatitis, we want to be proactive, doing what we can to limit the potentially harmful effects of copper that's frequently found in really just unjustifiable excess to the minimum required for growth and maintenance. We simply want readily available information so we can be advocates for the health of our Dobermans. If you support setting a cap on copper in dog food and support the right for consumers to have easily understandable labeling for the copper value in dog foods, then please share your opinion prior to March 1st, 2024 with AAFCO. You can email your opinion to AAFCO at aafco@aafco.org with the subject line Copper Claim Workgroup Comment. Again, that's aafco@aafco.org with the subject line Copper Claim Workgroup Comment. Take a bow. Good job.